The studio buzzed with its usual pre-show energy, cameras humming softly, crew members bustling quietly behind the scenes, the faint scent of coffee lingering in the air. But beneath this familiar routine, Steve Harvey sat alone in his green room, a quiet storm swirling within him that no one could see. His fingers drummed nervously on the armrest of his chair as he glanced at his phone, hesitating before unlocking a message that would change the course of his day, and perhaps his life. The message was from an unexpected sender, Ibrahim Traoré, the president of Burkina Faso. Steve's brow furrowed in confusion, a mix of curiosity and disbelief knitting his features. What could a man halfway across the world want from him? As he read the heartfelt words, a swell of emotions began to rise from somewhere deep inside. An unfamiliar tightness in his chest, a fluttering in his stomach, as if invisible hands were gently squeezing his heart. The words spoke not just to his fame or influence but to the essence of who he was. The man who, through simple words spoken on a radio or TV screen, had offered hope where despair once reigned. Ibrahim's message was raw and honest, filled with gratitude and sorrow, painting vivid scenes of a childhood shadowed by war and poverty, yet softened by the warmth of Steve's voice crossing oceans to offer comfort. With each sentence, Steve felt the invisible barriers between two distant worlds crumble, replaced by a fragile, precious connection. When the live show began, Steve's usual easy confidence faltered. His eyes, steady and strong for so many years, shimmered with unshed tears as he recounted Ibrahim's message to the audience. It wasn't just a letter, it was a lifeline, a bridge between pain and hope, a testament to the unexpected power of words. For a moment, the laughter and applause faded into silence, replaced by a collective, breath-held reverence. Steve's voice wavered, carrying the weight of his own reflections and the sorrow of a people he had never met but now felt inexplicably bound to. The emotional floodgate had opened, and tears spilled freely down his cheeks, raw and unashamed. The audience saw not the entertainer or the celebrity, but a man profoundly moved, humbled by the realization that his voice had become a beacon for those lost in darkness. In that moment, under the bright studio lights, Steve Harvey was no longer just a host. He was a vessel of empathy, a living reminder that connection transcends borders, and that even the smallest gesture of kindness can ripple across continents and change lives forever. The letter from President Ibrahim Traoré arrived like a whisper carried on a fragile breeze, yet within its delicate folds lay a tempest of emotion. Pain interwoven with hope, despair laced with resilience. As Steve unfolded the words, the ink seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of a nation burdened by scars too deep for most to fathom. Ibrahim's voice, though distant, resonated profoundly, echoing across continents and into the very core of Steve's being. The letter began not with grand political rhetoric, but with a simple confession of vulnerability. Ibrahim spoke of nights haunted by the cries of children lost to violence, of mothers whose tears had carved rivers into the dusty earth. He painted a stark portrait of a country caught in the relentless grip of conflict and hardship, where dreams often withered under the unyielding sun of despair. Yet, amid this desolation, he found a thread of light woven through the static of suffering, the soothing cadence of Steve's voice reaching through the airwaves, a balm for wounds invisible yet searing. Each sentence carried a weight that settled heavily in Steve's chest. Ibrahim described how, in moments when hope seemed a distant memory, he would listen to Steve's words, a simple joke, a heartfelt encouragement, and feel a surge of courage. That distant laughter became a lifeline, a reminder that even in the darkest night, the dawn would come. It was not merely entertainment, it was a bridge spanning the vast chasm of isolation and fear. Through this connection, Ibrahim revealed his own humanity, a leader not only commanding armies and policies but feeling deeply the pain and dreams of his people. The letter's tone shifted subtly, embracing a plea as fragile as it was fierce, a call not just for aid or attention, but for understanding. Ibrahim implored Steve to use his voice not only to entertain but to illuminate the struggles hidden behind headlines, to bring the world's gaze to places too often forgotten. The sincerity of his words cut through the usual noise of politics and media, laying bare the raw urgency of a people crying out for solidarity. As Steve read on, The letter became a mirror reflecting his own doubts and fears. His moments of questioning whether his work mattered beyond the laughter it provoked. Ibrahim's message was a revelation, a reminder that the ripples of kindness and empathy spread far beyond what eyes could see. The letter closed with a quiet hope, fragile yet unyielding, that together they might kindle a light strong enough to pierce the darkness enveloping a distant land. In the silence that followed, Steve felt the profound weight of responsibility settle upon him. This was no longer just a message. It was a lifeline cast across the divide, a testament to the power of connection, the enduring strength of the human spirit, and the undeniable truth that even the smallest voice can echo across the world, touching lives and inspiring change in ways unimaginable. The invitation arrived unexpectedly, a letter so carefully penned that every stroke of ink seemed to carry the weight of unspoken hopes and dreams. It was not just an official summons. It was a fragile thread reaching out across vast oceans and continents, a heartfelt beckoning that stirred something deep within Steve's soul. As his eyes traced the elegant script, the words unfolded like a quiet melody, carrying with them the silent voices of a land yearning to be seen, to be understood beyond the veil of headlines and distant news reports. Burkina Faso, a name he had heard whispered in news cycles, often associated with struggle, conflict, and resilience, now transformed in his mind into a living, breathing place pulsing with life, with stories aching to be told. The letter was an echo of those stories, an invitation not merely to visit, but to step into the very heart of a people's existence, to bear witness to their courage and their pain. It was an offering of trust, a fragile bond formed between a distant leader and a voice that had long been a source of solace for many. As Steve lingered over the words, he could almost feel the heat of the Sahel sun, the dusty roads winding through villages, the faces of children with eyes bright yet shadowed by hardship. The letter spoke of shared humanity, of bridges waiting to be built, not of charity, but of understanding and solidarity. It was a call to break through the barriers of distance and indifference, to confront the uncomfortable truths that lay beneath the surface of a world too quick to look away. The psychological weight of the invitation settled over Steve like a quiet storm, stirring a tumult of emotions: hope, fear, responsibility, and an overwhelming sense of purpose. To accept meant stepping into uncertainty, into a reality stark and raw, where laughter and sorrow danced side by side. Yet it also meant embracing the possibility of connection, of making visible the invisible threads that bind us all. In that moment, Steve felt the fragile yet fierce pulse of destiny. The letter was more than words on paper. It was a summons to awaken empathy, to listen beyond noise, to engage not as a distant spectator but as a participant in a story far greater than himself. It was an invitation to carry forward a message of hope, to stand with those whose voices had been muffled for too long, and to remind the world that even the most isolated corners are touched by the light of human kindness. And so, with the letter cradled gently in his hands, Steve knew that his journey was just beginning, not merely a trip to a faraway land, but a passage into the depths of shared humanity, where every step would unravel new truths and forge new connections, weaving a tapestry of understanding from the threads of courage and compassion. The moment Steve's feet touched the soil of Burkina Faso, a quiet wave of emotion surged through him, an invisible current carrying both the weight of expectation and the fragile hope of new beginnings. The air was thick with a warmth that went beyond the tropical sun beating down. It was the warmth of genuine welcome, an embrace extended not out of obligation but from a deep-rooted sense of shared humanity. The faces that greeted him were etched with stories, lines carved by hardship, eyes shining with resilience and pride. Each smile, each nod carried an unspoken message. Here you are seen, you are valued, you belong. As he moved through the crowds, Steve's mind wrestled with the intensity of it all, the overwhelming flood of sensations and emotions, the stark contrast between the scenes he had imagined and the reality unfolding before him. There was a softness in their greetings that belied the harshness of the world they lived in, a tenderness carefully cultivated amid the unforgiving rhythms of life. The people's eyes searched his, looking for sincerity, for a recognition that went beyond words. And in that exchange, a fragile connection was forged, fragile yet profound, a meeting of souls across divides both physical and emotional. The journey to this moment had been long and uncertain, But now, standing amidst a tapestry of vibrant colors, rich sounds, and palpable hope, Steve felt the profound truth of his mission crystallize. This was no mere visit. It was a communion with a people who had endured storms of history, of circumstance, of loss, and yet had not surrendered their spirit. Their hospitality was not just a gesture. It was an act of courage, an offering of trust to a stranger who carried the weight of their stories on his shoulders. In the quiet moments between welcomes and handshakes, Steve found himself reflecting on the invisible threads that bind us all, the shared fears, the dreams, the aching longing for peace and dignity. The psychological gravity of these realizations pressed upon him, a reminder that beneath the surface of every greeting lay complex histories and unseen wounds. Yet, amid that gravity, there was also light, a resilience that shone through the smiles of children playing barefoot in dusty streets, in the gentle words of elders who spoke with both wisdom and hope. This reception was more than a formality. It was a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit. It was a reminder that even in places marked by struggle, there is an abundance of kindness, a wellspring of community and belonging. And as Steve looked into those welcoming eyes, he knew that his journey here was not just about witnessing but about listening deeply, about carrying their stories forward with the reverence and care they deserved. The warmth of that reception lingered long after the crowds dispersed, settling within Steve like a steady flame, quiet but unyielding. It fueled his resolve to honor this fragile bond, to navigate the complexities ahead with humility and grace, and to let the shared humanity he encountered here transform not only his understanding of the world but the very core of his being. The room was quiet, almost reverent, as Steve stepped inside. A humble gathering place filled with faces both familiar and foreign, faces that bore the marks of time and struggle yet shimmered with a fragile hope. As he looked around, his heart tightened, a mix of anticipation and a deep, aching vulnerability swelling within him. These were the people who had listened, who had believed in the words he once shared, who had carried those words like fragile seeds planted in rocky soil, uncertain if they would ever take root. And yet, here they were, proof of resilience, proof of the quiet power of human connection. One by one they came forward, men and women young and old, each carrying stories etched into their eyes and the worn lines of their hands. Their voices trembled slightly as they spoke, not out of weakness, but from the weight of emotions long bottled inside. Steve heard of dreams rekindled, of lives changed in ways he had only hoped were possible. There was a woman who had found the courage to start a small business, her smile shy but radiant, her gratitude palpable like a warm embrace. An elderly man, whose hands shook as he recounted the moment his son returned from afar, a reunion once thought impossible. Each story was a thread weaving through the tapestry of shared pain and triumph, a testament to the quiet ripple effect of words spoken with intention and heart. Steve felt the swell of emotion rise within him, a storm of humility and awe crashing against the shores of his own self-doubt. How fragile and precious were these moments, moments where hope took tangible form in the eyes of those who had dared to believe. Their gratitude was not just for him but for something greater, for the promise that amid darkness there can be light, amid despair a flicker of possibility. And in their presence, Steve was forced to confront his own shadows, the fears, the uncertainties, the times he had doubted whether his voice could ever matter. Yet here, in this room heavy with shared histories and unspoken understanding, the psychological weight of those doubts lifted, replaced by a profound sense of responsibility and connection. It was more than inspiration. It was a call to continue, to hold space for these fragile hopes, to nurture them with care and unwavering belief. The encounter was a mirror reflecting the complexity of human spirit, how pain and hope, despair and courage, can coexist in the same breath. As the meeting drew to a close, Steve felt a silent promise settle within him, not just to carry their stories forward, but to honor the trust they had placed in him. Their voices, once distant echoes, had become a chorus swelling in his heart, a reminder that the power of connection transcends distance and doubt. And in that sacred exchange, something profound was born, a shared understanding that while the journey ahead might be fraught with challenges, it was also lit by the steady, unyielding light of human resilience and compassion. Ton kak fan no, ko su lin ket jua kak fan tiang on. ChatGPT said. In that fragile moment, beneath the vast sky that stretched endlessly over borders and seas, something profound stirred, a connection that defied geography, language, and circumstance. It was not merely the crossing of physical boundaries, but the invisible threads of empathy and shared humanity weaving themselves tightly around disparate lives. Steve felt it deep within his chest, a quiet thrum that pulsed with the rhythm of countless stories, hopes, and sorrows converging in a single fragile point of understanding. The faces before him were more than strangers. They were mirrors reflecting fragments of his own fears, dreams, and vulnerabilities. The weight of this realization was both overwhelming and strangely liberating. It dawned on him that despite the miles, despite the seemingly insurmountable differences in culture and experience, there existed a universal language. The language of pain, joy, resilience, and longing. Each tear that shimmered in the light, each hesitant smile, spoke of a shared journey, a collective heartbeat that transcended all divisions. In their eyes, Steve saw the echoes of his own doubts and hopes, the silent battles fought in the shadows of their souls, and the indomitable courage that refused to be extinguished. This connection seeped into every fiber of his being, stirring memories of his own moments of isolation and yearning. It was as if the invisible walls that once separated him from the world dissolved, replaced by a profound sense of belonging. Here, in this space charged with vulnerability and trust, Steve understood that true connection demanded more than superficial greetings or fleeting gestures. It required raw honesty, the willingness to expose one's own fractures and to see, without judgment, the fractures in others. It was a psychological communion, a deep and sometimes painful reckoning with the shared fragility of the human condition. The emotions that swirled inside him were complex and layered, a mingling of sorrow for the wounds carried silently, gratitude for the courage to show up despite them, and hope for the unspoken possibilities that this connection might birth. It was not a tidy resolution but an ongoing dialogue between hearts, a living testament to the resilience that emerges when we allow ourselves to be truly seen and to truly see others. And in that intimate exchange, Steve found a flicker of light that would carry him forward, an ember of solidarity glowing bright against the shadows of despair. This crossing of borders, then, was not just physical but profoundly psychological and emotional, a passage into a space where empathy bridged the gulf between self and other, where the human spirit, with all its fragility and strength, found a moment of unity. The connection they shared was fragile yet unbreakable, delicate as a whispered secret yet as enduring as the sun's rise. And as Steve stood there, heart open and mind awakened, he knew this was the beginning of a journey that transcended distance and difference, a journey bound by the quiet power of shared humanity and the deep, abiding need to belong. Ton kak fan no, ko su lin ket jua kak fan tieng on. ChatGPT said. The moment the gift was presented, a stretch of land, raw and untouched beneath the open sky, something shifted deep within the soul, a tremor of emotion too complex for simple words. It was more than just soil and borders, more than a deed or a parcel of earth. It was a tangible promise, a sacred trust handed down from one heart to another, heavy with the weight of history and hope. As the dust settled on the surface, so too did the memories, fears, and dreams of those who had come before, intertwining with a silent vow that this land would be more than a mere inheritance. It would be a sanctuary, a foundation, a future carefully tended. In the eyes of the giver, there was a fierce tenderness, a protective fire that burned quietly beneath the surface. The gift was not merely material, it was a beacon of continuity, a bridge spanning generations, cultures, and struggles. It carried with it an unspoken recognition of sacrifices made, of lives uprooted and rebuilt, of promises kept and broken in the tides of time. And yet, amidst this solemn gravity, there was also a fragile lightness, a hope that the recipient would nurture this legacy, shape it with compassion and wisdom, and find in it a sense of belonging that perhaps had been lost or obscured before. The recipient's heart fluttered with a mixture of awe and responsibility, each breath laden with the weight of what this land represented. It was a calling, a challenge, an invitation to root oneself deeply despite the winds of uncertainty that had blown relentlessly before. The mind wandered through the unspoken stories embedded in the soil, the laughter and tears, the struggles etched invisibly beneath the surface, the hopes waiting patiently like seeds beneath the earth's crust. There was a profound psychological reckoning happening here. A moment where past wounds met the possibility of healing, where identity and legacy converged in a sacred dialogue. Words spoken were sparse, but they resonated with gravity, echoing through the quiet spaces between heartbeats. The promise that accompanied the gift was not just about ownership or possession. It was about stewardship, about honoring the invisible threads that bind us to land, to memory, to each other. It was a call to cultivate not just crops or wealth, but trust, dignity, and connection. The land, silent and enduring, became a living metaphor for resilience, a reminder that even in the harshest conditions, life persists, adapts, and blooms. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows that stretched across the earth, the weight of the moment settled like a gentle mantle. The gift and the promise together formed a covenant, a bond forged not only in soil and spirit but in the shared acknowledgement of human frailty and strength. In this exchange, there was an unspoken truth, that legacy is not merely given or received, but created anew in the space between generations, in the care and courage of those willing to embrace the full complexity of their inheritance. And in that sacred trust lay the fragile yet unbreakable hope for a future shaped by love, memory, and the enduring power of home.